Furina might be the best character in the game. Oh, what a shocker, you might think. After all, from a meta standpoint, for Archons it's natural to be that strong. But for Furina specifically to possibly define herself as the best character in the game, that means she's possibly better than some of the Hydro staples we have in the game, like Shinjo or Yelan, and this fact alone is sure to ring some bells. But why is she so good? What does she do so well that it makes me spell out something so bold in pre-release stages? Simply put, her damage profile looks completely unbalanced for an off-field Hydro character, her supportive capabilities from a buffing sense are incredibly good, and she paves the way for completely new styles of teams. So let's take a look at her kit and figure out how. Something unique to Furina when it comes to Fontaine characters is that she has access to both Ousia and Pneuma alignments. She can only have one alignment at a given time, and she can change it by using her charge attack, which has a very quick animation. And the interesting thing here is that her kit structure changes depending on the alignment. Specifically, her elemental skill, which has a 30 seconds duration and a 20 seconds cooldown, changes its effects depending on the alignment. The Ousia effect, which is the one Furina will have starting out, is the offensive one, the one that will make her do damage. After dealing some initial AoE damage, the Ousia elemental skill will summon 3 pets, and all of them will start attacking opponents right after. These 3 pets, or turret structure, might remind you of Yae Miko, who can also summon 3 turrets through her elemental skill. However, while all of Yae's Miko turrets all have the same attack frequency and internal cooldown, for Furina it's not like that. Each of Furina's turrets has its own internal cooldown, its own attack frequency, its own damage scaling, and its own HP absorption from the whole team. Yes, HP absorption. When each of the turrets attack, it will be draining a set amount of HP % from the whole team. This HP drain will only happen on a specific character if its HPs are above 50% to begin with. This is actually the important part, because the turrets will have access to an extra damage multiplier if this HP drain occurs even once, and this bonus will last for the entirety of the elemental skill duration. So this means that for the elemental skill to benefit from this damage multiplier, every teammate will have to be over 50% when the rotation starts. Seems easy enough, but the surprising part is that it isn't at all. Over a 20 seconds long rotation, the turrets will be draining around 50% HP from the whole team. So, without a team healer like Jin or Baiju, that means the elemental skill will lose access to this damage multiplier by the time the second rotation in their base hits. It is technically possible to heal the whole team with a single target healer as well, like Cookie or Bennett, by simply switching around with the teammates while their healing effects are active, but this isn't very practical to me, and in many scenarios it's a rotation extension. This might sound intimidating to you, considering these healers like Jin or Baiju are not typically part of meta teams, but trust me, it will be worth it. While Furina's elemental skill is not the only part of her kit that will make these healers meta, its damage potential already makes the outlook much more promising. At free-to-play investment, over a 20 seconds long rotation, Furina's elemental skill can even out-damage Yelan's elemental burst, so she surpasses the previous best off-field hydro damage dealer we had. This is including the damage bonuses her passive provides depending on how much maximum HP she has, and also the damage bonuses her burst will give her, but we'll talk about this last part later. Also, this is about solo Hydro scenarios, where you have just one between Furina and Yelan. If you have both on team, then Furina's elemental burst buffs, which again I'll talk about later more in detail of course, will start impacting Yelan's damage as well, and the situation looks more balanced. But this is still Furina's doing, so it goes to her credit. Also, it should be noted that a 20 seconds long rotation limits Furina's elemental skill potential as opposed to Yelan's elemental burst potential, because while the latter fits rotation of such length perfectly, Furina's elemental skill can get even better in terms of damage if the rotation gets longer, since it lasts 30 seconds. Practically, this bodes well both for teams that have long rotations like New Villette teams or Sino teams, and for realistic scenarios where your rotation execution exceeds 20 seconds, which is very normal actually. Regarding her hydro application, I don't want to bore you with the technicalities, it is slightly less than Yelan's, but not to an extent it actually makes a real difference. For example, with her as the only hydro character on the team, you should be able to vape every Hutao hit if you also use Kazuha Hydro Infused Elemental Burst alongside the elemental skill Furina, which is the exact same case as Yelan. Also, double hydro lineups will be very popular, and when you put two units like Furina and Yelan together, or Furina and Shinjo, you will have so much hydro application you will want to sell it. Her particle generation is around 7 or 8 over a 20 seconds long rotation and 10 or 11 over a 25 seconds long rotation, so she can be a decent battery for characters who need it, like Nubilet for example. Having said all of this, let's switch alignment and talk about the Pneuma elemental skill, which is much less exciting. At the cost of her entire damage potential, her hydro application and her particle generation, Furina will start healing with this version of the elemental skill. These heals will be pretty substantial and will have a pretty long range, but they will only heal the active character. So functioning wise it can be compared to Kokomi's elemental skill for example, which has a smaller range and it has weaker heals, but in turn has better hydro application since this version of Furina's elemental skill has none, and of course particle generation. So Furina's elemental skill will only be healing, which is not great. The complete lack of offensive upside for this version of the elemental skill just makes it look like an emergency button you can push when you need heals for your active character and nothing else. So this means it will be sidelined in favor of the offensive version of the elemental skill most of the time. The Pneuma version also won't be draining HP from the team of course, which is something that is crucial to the correct functioning of Furina's elemental burst, which I'll finally talk about now. For every change in terms of HP percentage for the characters on the team, be it HP loss or HP gain through heals, the elemental burst will be giving them healing bonuses and damage bonuses to all of them. Every percentage of HP change will constitute a stack of the elemental burst, and the maximum will be reached at 300 stacks. At most, at talent level 10, Furina's elemental burst will be able to grant the whole team a 75% damage bonus and a 30% healing bonus. These values are enough to make even Kazuha scratch his head, but of course they're not easy to enable. Furina's elemental burst is structured in a way that during its 18 seconds of duration, the bonuses it will give to the whole team will change dynamically depending on how many stacks it has. That means that to figure out the true value of this elemental burst, we have to consider its potential damage bonuses at specific time frames in the rotation. At a practical level, so in realistic scenarios, something that helps this very unique elemental burst out is the fact that for most teams, most of the damage is dealt in the second half of the rotation. For teams that have established carries, if you exclude things like using a normal attack on every character swap to trigger coordinated attacks from elemental bursts like Yelan's or Shinjo's, which I feel like is something most people don't do, then about 95% of the team damage will be dealt while your main carry is on field. Now, the exact time frame of the start of this sequence depends on the carry and the team. Some carries like Wanderer like to go on field very early in the rotation because they have a very short support setup time. For the most part, I'm assuming that from the time your Furina elemental burst gets casted to the time your carry enters the field, 6 to 8 seconds will pass. This will generally give Furina's burst enough time to provide a decent damage bonus for the whole team, but not extremely impressive, not even higher than Kazuha's for example. This is where healers come in play and become even more effective at making Furina a top tier character. Generally, you want to use your healer's team-wide heal right before your carry enters the field. That specific time in the rotation is when you can maximize your stacks generated before your team starts dealing real damage. The reason is that most team-wide heals will be enough for all of your characters to recover the HP lost due to Furina's elemental skill entirely. and as a result, you will be doubling all the stacks you generated up to that point. This scenario unquestionably makes Furina's Elemental Burst the most impressive buffing capability we have in the game in terms of damage bonus buffing, considering it's not only the ability that has the highest ceiling in terms of damage bonus buffing for a single character, but it also applies to the whole team. And here starts the manhunt to find the best healer to pair with Furina. I've gotten this question a lot. Who is the best healer to put on Furina's teams? And the answer is, it depends, of course. Generally, all the healers that have access to team-wide heals will be able to maximize the stacks you'll generate through Furina's Elemental Burst just fine. And since none of them has incredible utility capabilities that set them apart compared to the others on all teams, the answer is it depends. Healers like Sayu or Jin, who can hold the Viridescent Maneater set, fit best on double Hydro teams where you need a character to swirl the Hydro typing and maximize the Hydro damage that will be dealt. By double Hydro here, I mean the double Hydro setups with Furina and Yanan or Furina and Chincho and a carry besides them. Non-anemo healers like Charlotte or Mika specifically that have supportive capabilities in their kits that are superior to Jin and Sayu, excluding the artifact impact, so the very decent Maneater thing, fit best on teams where you can also put Kazuha to cover that spot, the very decent Maneater spot. So teams like Breezely carry, Ayaka carry, Wanderer carry, since he is a character that doesn't even need a unit to hold the very decent Maneater set, so you can use these healers that have superior supportive effects for him specifically. Double Hydro lineups with Nubilet or Ayato who are exceptions to the double Hydro teams I said before, because in this scenario your second Hydro is the carry and that leaves 2 open slots to finish the team, so you can put a healer like Charlotte or Mika and then Kazuha. These scenarios also allow for the usage of weaker but still perfectly usable units like Barbara in the healing slot. Dendro healers like Yaya or Baiju will mostly be useful for Furina on quick bloom teams that have Steino as the carry. You can also make the argument for teams like Nilubloom or Burgeon that can also use these Dendro team-wide healers, but typically these teams that don't get much better the more damage bonus you have on a team-wide scale, so the only argument for Furina here is the damage she provides, which is not that strong of an argument by itself. Then there are single target healers like Cookie or Bennett that can make some teams interesting. Cookie for the Quick Bloom Alhaitham team and Bennett for basically every team in the game. You won't be maximizing Furina's stacks as much as you will do with the healers I analyzed before, but since Cookie and Bennett, at least from a theoretical standpoint, open up for team possibilities that weren't available for the healers I just talked about, then they're worth considering. Practically, however, I'm not really sold on these possibilities, mainly because I feel like they're going to be very situational. The healing just won't be enough on a team-wide scale to make you recover all the HP you will lose through Furina's Elemental Skill, and this in the long term means fewer stacks generated. While there are ways to mitigate this effect by swapping out and in with characters to make them receive the heals by the active healing, this is not very realistic or practical for the common player, for the average player, and even for more meta players, this is not very consistent in my opinion. And this isn't even considering the damage you will take by opponents, which depending on who you're facing can be very high, and makes the dependency on real team-wide healers even higher. Furina does have a passive that can make it a tiny bit better for weaker healers like this to be placed on teams, since this passive will heal the whole team by a fixed percentage of their HP when the active character gets overhealed by a character that is not Furina. Still, realistically, I don't think it will be that great for single target healers. Maybe in tandem with a team-wide healing effect like the one generated by Prototype Ember it can work, but it requires you to have on team somebody that can hold that weapon, like Mona, but the exact scenario is hard to visualize right now. Lastly, on-field drivers that can heal the whole team through their attacks like Kokomi, Barbara, Chi-Chi and even Noelle can be very nice pairings with Furina. The concept is that of a double to triple Hydro or even 4 Hydro units on the team in the case of Kokomi or Barbara to allow these on-field drivers to drive these off-field units that are very strong like Yelan, Shincho and Furina, who doesn't need driving but needs the healing they generate, and they will generate plenty. The on-field drivers on their end can also deal some damage by using the Ousia Clam set and also through the normal usage of their normal attacks, but the big chunk of the damage of the team is dealt by the off-field characters, and also the investment scaling damage is dealt by them, since Ousia Clam won't scale well with investment. So if you have a high investment Yelan and also want to invest on your Furina's damage, these are nice picks. As a whole, Furina's team situation looks great because it seems that replacing Bennett and a second unit on the team with Furina and a team-wide healer can have positive offensive impact. It seems a bit needless to me to discuss every team that can use Furina because Hydro is a typing that is useful to basically every team in the game. But the takeaway here is that the core formed by Furina and a team-wide healer can at least compete with other teams' best option and most of the time surpass them in terms of calculated damage. As of right now, we really lack team-wide healers that have serious supportive impact, and to begin with, there are not many team-wide healers that are limited 5 stars. My prediction is that Hoyoverse will start releasing more limited 5 stars that can heal on a team-wide scale and can have a better supportive impact since they will fit better with Furina, and that of course will make her better. In terms of builds, she is honestly a pretty straightforward character. Artifacts wise, since she is an elemental skill damage dealer, it is obvious that the golden troop set fits perfectly. There are other options that can also be nice, but honestly you probably had enough time to farm a nice golden troop set by now, so just get a full set and give it to her, she needs it. And I warn you, if you ask me in the comments if she should use the full Tenacity of Millilith set to buff the whole team, I will slap you in the face. The interesting thing here in terms of builds is that all the damage bonus generated by her set, her burst and her passive makes this damage bonus redundant. Not redundant in terms of bad of course, but just not that efficient in terms of stats optimization. That means that the HP Goblet becomes extremely competitive with the Hydro Goblet, although it kinda depends on the weapon as well and the stats it gives. This is especially great if you consider that you're much more likely to get a HP Goblet with good substats than you are to get a Hydro Goblet with good substats, so it's great for build purposes. Regarding her energy requirements, they're not extremely high because her burst cost is just of 60, but considering how crucial the burst is to her overall functioning, fulfilling these requirements is pretty important. Again, it depends. It depends on your teammates, the rotation length, and if you have any Favonius weapon or team, or even weapons like Xephus. In general, if you have anywhere from 160 to 180 energy recharge, you will be fine on most teams, although you might need a little bit more on some teams where the requirements get particularly extreme. In terms of weapons, there is a freely obtainable weapon in Festering Desire that is extremely good on her as a free-to-play option, but you might lack that if you started playing after the Albedo event in 1.2. Look! You're not alone, even I don't have it. I'm a day 1 player, but my first account got hacked, so I don't have it right now on this other account. But I never expected the repercussions to be so huge so late into the game. I guess I'll just give her my pay-to-win key then. Say bye-bye, Nilu. Hoyoverse, you won. So real talk, Festering Desire is the second best option after the obvious signature that is stronger by a decent amount compared to other options, but it's not that important to have on a sub DPS that won't deal the majority of the team damage. Generally, I would only suggest pulling the signature on carries that have a huge team damage contribution, and this is clearly not the case here. If you're just like me and you're missing the Festering Desire, there are pay-to-win options that are just as good, like Jade Cutter or Key of Kejnishut. The latter can probably settle as the second best option on teams where its passive can be used for supportive purposes, like Hutao Vape teams. Alternatively, there are a lot of other options, and among the free-to-play ones, there is this one we recently got in an event, the Tube, which funnily enough is a downgraded version of the Festering Desire. Funny how it works. power creep in reverse. But again, since her damage contribution won't surpass 30% on teams for the most part, you shouldn't stress about not getting the best possible option for her. A free-to-play option is fine. And that's it. I'm not going to talk about Furina's constellations in this video because I think that topic deserves its own video. And to give my conclusive thoughts on Furina, she is overpowered. Pull for her.